Major developments over the weekend, providing the media with no shortage of headlines, but at times, the news just didn't seem to be enough. There were multiple instances that touch on some of the very issues that we talk about here on this program, so it only makes sense to take a deeper look. Joining us now to help us do that is Amber Athey, the Washington editor for the Spectator and the host of Unfit to Print at the Daily Caller. So Amber, we've heard in the past, multiple times actually, about the president having a new tone after some sort of event, but this weekend, even some of the media were saying that very same phrase. So I want to take a look at how it was covered on MSNBC really quickly. Let's take a look.
The first question I'll pose to you, Robert. Interestingly, as we listened to the president via Twitter last night, is it my imagination, or was there a somewhat gentler tone to this president? Not caustic when he said, "Thank you to all, love," all caps. There was something rather heartfelt. And any interpretation on that? Have we seen something like this before from this president, Robert?
So I want to ask you, overall, the way that this has been covered so far, I mean, it's been a little bit of a development, but what have you made of the media's response to this latest diagnosis regarding the president?
Well, regarding that MSNBC clip, it certainly feels like a little bit of wishful thinking because we know the media is not a fan of the president's current tone. And I hate to burst their bubble, but if you took a look at the president's Twitter today, it seems like he's back in his old spirit. I would suspect that his gentler tone the other night was probably due to maybe fatigue and some other side effects from the coronavirus, but he was tweeting out all caps messages for people to go vote today. He was even bragging about the fact that he felt like he was 20 years younger after his coronavirus treatment. So I don't think the media is going to get their wish there.
No, I think you're right. And I think the Twitter feed was really a sigh of relief for many of the supporters because he was relatively quiet beginning on Friday, going into Saturday, as well as Sunday. There wasn't too much activity coming from his Twitter feed for a lot of people. That's how they gauge how the president's feeling. But you're exactly right. I woke up this morning and I just scrolled a couple times to get to the last tweet. So I think that is indicative of how the president is feeling. But that somber tone, it may have started on Friday. We even saw Rachel Maddow. She had a rather impressive response. She was wishing the president well and telling her viewers to do the same. However, that wasn't necessarily the case on Saturday Night Live, where about 48 hours after the diagnosis, the jokes were already coming in. I want to show some of the highlights from that episode.
Now just imagine if science and karma could somehow team up to send us all a message about how dangerous this virus can be.
Before we even get started, let's say the elephant in the room. President Trump's in the hospital from COVID, and I just want to say my heart goes out to COVID.
I don't know, to use an expression maybe too soon. I don't know. It's one of those things where we didn't even know necessarily what the president's status was at that time, but it was already making its way into the jokes of Saturday Night Live. You saw Chris Rock there. You saw Jim Carrey playing Joe Biden. But I think it's also interesting that that was probably a completely rewritten show in the past 24 hours. This was the debut of the new season, and it looks like they completely restructured the show off of the president's diagnosis, which took place about 24, 48 hours beforehand. So what do you think that is indicative of?
What I don't understand about that segment in particular is that the left are the ones that keep telling us about how dangerous this virus is and how it's basically a death sentence for anyone who receives it. And yet they felt like it was appropriate to make light of the situation that the president has contracted this virus. So I think it kind of tells you a little bit about the fact that maybe they are just a little bit overblowing concerns about the virus and don't actually believe what they're selling to the American people if they thought that it was no big deal to mock the president's health predicament.
I mean, it's a double standard, to say the least. And I think one thing that demonstrated that is you saw, for example, the Weekend Update people making jokes about the president's diagnosis. We saw Chris Rock there, Jim Carrey. But then there was another moment, too, where they had a silent tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They showed one of the actors there. She was dressed as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, looks up at the sky, and then they have kind of a little tribute that plays. And, I mean, if that doesn't show where the actors and where this show stands in regard to politics, I don't know what does. But that was only kind of the beginning of all of the outrage when it came to the media. Of course, more conservatives were mad about that than maybe those on the left, as reasons as you could, of course, imagine. But then Sunday rolled around, and the president issued a video saying that he would be visiting supporters outside of Walter Reed Hospital. And then just moments later, he drove by in his motorcade, and the rest of the media was essentially thrown into complete chaos. I want to show how CNN covered that drive-by. Let's take a look.
The photos the White House has been releasing, the videos, we have to show them because they're the only evidence we have of the president's condition, but they are propagandistic. That's unfortunately the situation we're in. And Anna, the White House Correspondents Association is calling out the White House right now. This is the press corps, the press pool that is supposed to travel with the president at all times. They were not informed about this photo op. They were not with him when this happened. That is a grievous breach of protocol. And the association is saying, quote, it is outrageous for the president to have left the hospital, even briefly, amid a health crisis without a protective pool present to ensure the American people know where their president is and how he is doing.
So one thing that confused me right there about the White House Correspondents Association response is they were mad that the president put other people in danger, but they wanted to know about it so they could have put more people in that area beforehand to cover the event. I don't know. What did you make of the response to that whole drive-by incident?
You're exactly right. Their response from the WHCA made zero sense, especially the part when they complained about the fact that they didn't know where the president was when he was literally in a car and we could see him. And then, of course, there was a bunch of fear-mongering about the fact that the president was in that car with Secret Service agents. And I would just remind people that if you're under the age of 50 and you're healthy, and Secret Service agents are some of the healthiest people in our country, the survival rate is about 99.9%. And everyone in the car was wearing full PPE, including N95 masks, goggles, and gowns. So the idea that this was literally killing Secret Service agents is just honestly ridiculous. And we even saw a former White House physician who worked in the Clinton and Bush administration say that the risk of this drive-by, as they're calling it, is very, very small. So this collective meltdown does not comport with reality.
No, and I noticed that interview that you're talking about, too. It went a little bit shorter than I think a lot of people on CNN were expecting it to go for, because that initial question was, how big of a threat is this? And I think his exact wordage was very, very low risk. And I don't think that's what they were expecting to hear. But I also saw some in the media calling it a plague parade, going as far to say that it was a super spreader event going around town. But, I mean, even that vehicle and the motorcade right there, I mean, it's designed to survive chemical attacks. I mean, it is completely enclosed. It's completely made sure that nothing comes in or out. And I mean, maybe that is more problematic for the Secret Service officers in that car. But to your point, even the former physician said with masks, with PPE, with all the protection, it was a very low risk. But I want to stay on CNN for 1 second, because we've talked on this program before about how many people in the media facilitate some fake narratives themselves, whether it's editing deceptive clips, such as the president's fine people comments, or asking him to condemn white supremacy, even though he has multiple times. And on Sunday, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer tried to do the same thing, reiterating a familiar line that we've heard before, only to be fact-checked by Jake Tapper of CNN. Check this out.
This threat is still very real. And the sad irony is that on the day that the president was admitted to the hospital with the very virus he called a hoax.
Just a quick fact check. The president didn't call the virus a hoax. He called Democratic and media concerns about it a hoax. That also is false, but that's just the precise lie that he told.
So I guess to some degree, give credit to Jake Tapper for calling Governor Whitmer out right there. But at the same time, was it that hard? I don't understand why this doesn't happen more often. I mean, there's so many times where these type of, I'll call them half-truths, to be generous, make it onto the airwaves and they don't get addressed or anything like that. And that's why someone like Governor Gretchen Whitmer feels confident repeating them over and over again. So when it comes to this, why doesn't the media just do it? Are they just playing into their whatever ecosystem that they want to be playing into?
Well, the problem with a lot of the media is that there's a negative feedback system when they do challenge Democrats, and they get called out by their colleagues for allegedly being too pro-Republican. This actually happened to Chuck Todd on Sunday on Meet the Press when he gave an interview to Trump campaign advisor Jason Miller for 10 minutes, and people were literally tweeting and complaining that he had given that individual, who is, of course, in a high-profile position related to the president's campaign, they were angry that they gave him a platform and that he didn't talk to Democrats for the same amount of time. So in some ways, the media really is in a lose-lose situation, because if they do confront Democrats, then they're called out by their colleagues. But if they do that to Republicans and not to Democrats, then of course they lose the massive amounts of trust among half of the country that leans Republican. So there's really no way for them to win right now.
And that really became evident to me last week, actually, when Ted Cruz appeared on CNN alongside Chris Cuomo. And Chris Cuomo said something along the lines of like, oh, well, I brought a Republican on tonight, so don't say that I don't cover the other side, as if that was some noble purpose to show the other side that represents, for example, 62 million people who came out and voted for President Trump. And I think that's something they frequently miss, is that it's so much for them against President Trump where they're missing the actual movement behind President Trump. He's not the cause, he's the symptom of what's happening on the ground. So I think that is something that they're missing, and I think that whenever President Trump is not in office, whether it's this next year or in 4 years, they're going to start feeling the effects of not having those ratings anymore, because President Trump actually saved a lot of these networks in 2016 who were already going under. But Amber Athey, I appreciate you coming on the program tonight, helping us make sense of all these clips from the past weekend. Thank you.